What's going on, world? It's your boy Trey, retro_GT. Welcome Friday afternoon. Welcome back. It's your local neighborhood therapist and social worker Trey, retro_GT, back for another episode of the G.Taylor Show. Make sure you like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Let me know what you think. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all your digital streaming platforms. And if I'm not on there, please let me know. Hope that your week has been well and everything is going smooth. I know my week has been a little bit terrible because my Lakers got swept, but that's another conversation for another day. So hope that y'all like the new episode we just dropped last week with my boy hip hop social worker Chris Scott. We chopped it up about the Ja Morant situation, talked about his Portland Trail Blazers and his number 3 pick that he got. I don't know what they're gonna do with that, but and some other things about mental wellness and things like that. But this week I have one of my good friends on here from Twitter that we finally met in a virtual space. And you know how there's people that you meet, and we just say virtually, right? Because it's been the pandemic, post-pandemic type thing, but you instantly just click with. I love those opportunities, and this guy is one of those guys where I just ended up following on Twitter, seeing him tweet a couple of times, and then we just instantly click. Now, let y'all know he is a Baltimore Ravens fan, so we'll have some conversations about that in a nutshell. But I want y'all to welcome Wes Wade to the podcast, man. What's going on, Wes? How you feel, man?
What's good, brother? Look, man, it's Friday. I'm down here in North Carolina where I stay. The sun is shining. I might get some fried fish. We doing good, man.
Oh, yeah, some fried fish, bro. I had some earlier this week.
Hey, you know what? Got the hot sauce ready, too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Wes, man, if the people don't know and they need to know about you, you do a lot of different things. You got a lot of different hats. You're a therapist, private practice owner, consultant, PhD candidate, bunch of different things. Tell the people who you are, what you're about, what you do, and a little bit about yourself.
Right. I appreciate that. I feel like both you and I and there's other folks, we like the Steve Harvey of mental health, man. We just do everything.
That's the first time I heard that.
Right. So like, well, I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. Mm-hmm. I'm a licensed clinical addiction specialist, certified clinical mental health counselor, national certified counselor. I have a master's degree from North Carolina Central University, HBCU, right here in Durham, in clinical mental health, and a second master's in career counseling. So I did a lot of career counseling at NC State University for like around 8 years and developed some programs over there of neurodiversity that got some recognition and really helped a lot of students get jobs and just have a place, right?
Yeah.
In addition to that, I'm a PhD candidate right now, man. I'm writing my dissertation, which is on Black adults who are neurodivergent and how their world of work correlates with their mental health and experiences of racism and all that kind of stuff. Right now I do a lot of consulting. I have a private practice, like you said, called Forward Counseling and Consulting. Probably do about 80% consulting, about 20% counseling at this point in time. Okay. Honestly, to be real with you, because the consulting pays better and I love the counseling work. I want to do a lot more of it, but it just doesn't pay the way that we need it to pay. Like I'm not in this to get rich, but I still like to have things. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. So how did you get into, so did you started out mostly college based career counseling, switched to private practice, but then more so consulting. As somebody that's continuing to try to get their foot in consulting more so, I guess maybe more so than therapy. How did you jump into the consulting space and get into that?
Yeah. I mean, I just forced my way in there like Suge Knight style, man. So, and honestly, man, it's kind of like things just happened. It wasn't even a lot of what I was doing. And I'm a little all over the place and things too, man. So I had originally started out with a corporate career. I was doing like business to business sales, client relationship management. I did that for like 10 years, man. And you gain a lot of skills in terms of developing business, closing deals, how to work with different people. What was wild was the trainings that we used to have and like those sales environments, they were therapy techniques. Like we learned transactional analysis, but they didn't call it that. Like the Sandler School of, I don't know, sales bull crap, whatever it's called, man. that's what they were doing. I hope that they trademarked it or something, or like got the rights, because they just rebranded it and everything. When I got my master's program, like I did this whole transition, I recognized this. I was like, oh, all this stuff is the same. These skills are the same. I'm just doing this for the benefit of people's mental health.
Right.
So I actually started my private practice immediately after I finished my master's degree. I just kept it on the side.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep my language polite here, but I used to call it like my forget you job, right? So it's like if my job got too tight, I'd be like, forget you, I'm out. I got my own thing to do, right? So I was doing mental health work on the side, maybe like 2 or 3 times a week for years to varying degrees, man. I did it on my own. I did have a brick and mortar. We were talking about that earlier. I had a brick and mortar location for like a little less than a year when I first started. It was too much. I got in over my head. Dude was a nice guy. Let me get out.
Right.
Did some in-home work with some people. I was doing some integrated health work with a physician's assistant with her clients who had like severe opioid use disorders and some other areas along those lines. But I was still at NC State full-time job in it. Right. Gotcha. And then I got in a PhD program while I was there too. And I was like, all right. And we have a kid. The wife and I got a kid who will be 7 in August. And we're talking about another one. She's like, look, I know you like to do a lot of stuff. You need it, but this is too much. And I was like, you're right. I got family first. I work on that. I'm not the best at that. Right. But I really try to make sure I'm giving my family my best. Right. And then, you know what, brother? Let me stop right there because I forgot your question. I'm about to just start rambling and tell my life story over here, man.
No, you're good. I was just saying how you got started in the consultancy, but it kind of just summed that up a lot as far as like where it sounds like where you already had that background, that experience, that networking, those connections. You got the mental health degree. You took that and you just kind of just leaned into it. And you said you had a family. And like you said, like with the brick and mortar, with the office space, same thing for me, man. Like I had our second child was incoming. My son, he just turned 1 like last week.
Man.
And
congrats. You were in it right now.
Yeah. And but I was full-time self-employed with my 6-year-old, and then had my son on the way. And I was like, okay, all right, we're trying to do both, take care of the house bills, the business bills, expand maybe, but I had to take a break somehow. And so I had to let go of my office space. We were talking about that earlier, and couldn't get nobody in there because everybody stayed virtual. And so yes, I definitely understand that. And that's how kind of where I pivot at to myself today, but still kind of, all right, what's next? You know what I'm saying? Cause it's still ongoing. So yeah, so that's what it is.
I love that part, that like, okay, what's next part? Because like for our field, there's so many options. Like you can be a straight counselor if you want, but there's consulting, there's coaching, you can develop your own programs for a nonprofit or your own nonprofit. You can do workshops, you can do keynotes. Like there's so many options. And I'm ADHD, I'm dyslexic. This is a big area that I work in. And so I really have to have a balance of a lot of things, but not too much and not too little. If I have too little, it's as bad as for me as having too much. I got to have a good number of things. So the consulting piece, when I was at NC State, I had started this program along with a friend of mine called Students Moving Forward. It was for students on the autism spectrum at NC State. And I use identity first language a lot. So you'll hear me say like autistic, I am ADHD, but I'll switch back and forth to like neutral language because people use everything, man. So I'm working with those students, and we ran this thing for 5 years, man. I've presented at the Stanford Neurodiversity Summit to talk about my stuff. I've presented across the country and in North Carolina a few times, like 12 different times about the program and the work that I was doing over there. And that's why I'm in my PhD programs, what my research is around.
Right.
And while we were doing that program, I was the one running that program. I was the one leading it and growing it. I also got on a planning committee for this thing called Link It, which is like kind of out of the governor's office here in North Carolina. It's a paid internship program for any college student. Doesn't matter if you're a community college, private college, 4-year public university. Don't matter if you graduated 5 years ago. You can get into this paid internship program and get a degree-related paid internship if you're on the autism spectrum in North Carolina. And that program still exists, and I helped to develop that program. Okay. One of the issues is recruiting. And so I started and I ran this for 3 years, which was the North Carolina Autistic Career Summit. And so I had employers like IBM, SAS, Credit Suisse, GSK, Bank of America. I mean, like a lot of big ones. And so we'd have about 14 employers. We had neurodivergent speakers. We people who weren't just in STEM, people who weren't just white men. We had Eric Garcia, who's a Hispanic man who went to UNC right down here. He's a journalist. He was a keynote. We had Judy Singer, who's the Australian woman who coined the term neurodiversity and first wrote about it in depth. We had a bunch of dope stuff, man. And so I got recognition through that. And some of I really should have way more writing, but doing all that, I didn't have time to write as much.
Yeah.
So I got some recognition from that. And I would say 95% of my consulting work has come out of that. People knew me from that, and they knew I was licensed, and then they reached out. Because I have zero advertising that I do. So right now, everything I do is, that's going to change. I'm just, got some other things going, but that's about as concise as I can get with that one, brother.
Wow. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like I was reading your website, and I was looking at all the accolades and these type of programs. I was like, yo, Wes is deep out here. But again, like, you know, when you're doing the work and you're in it, right? Like sometimes that marketing piece kind of goes away because I'm doing it, I'm in it. But then it also leads to those connections that you talk about from a consulting standpoint. And you're right. That's where like you kind of have to, as a clinician, like trying to figure out, okay, what's my lane? Do I want to do therapy full time, or do I want to do consulting full time? I've had history with building these programs, but how can I, you know, make this profitable for me as well? And keep a smaller caseload. So that definitely answers the question. Very easy on that. And I want to come back to kind of some of that conversation around neurodiversity, because I think it's a very important conversation and a topic. And I know it's very important for us as the black community, but also as black men as well, because and black boys, because some of it leads us down different paths, or school systems, structure, systemic issues that show up. And for me, when I thought about bringing you on, I know we wanted to talk about, we get into some fun stuff beforehand, but when I was thinking about it, I was like, I want to define this, right, for us as black men and black boys, because I think sometimes when we hear it, we get scared from it, we get a stigma behind it, but then also we run away from or shy away from it. You know what I'm saying? And I want, you know, to help, you know, define it for us so that we know what's going on and people can pick up on it more. So we'll definitely do that later on with that. But I want to get to real quickly some sports conversation, because you said you're a Baltimore native. So I get that.
I am. I'm born and mostly raised in Maryland. We lived in Baltimore at one point in time. I was born in D.C. My family, both sides of my family, is as far back as we can trace, and we can go back multiple generations. I know a lot of my family history. We're Maryland through and through, man. So soon as Baltimore got a team back, like half my family is Redskins fans, man. And as soon as Baltimore got a team back, because my pops grew up a Baltimore Colts fan, right? As soon as they got the team back, 100% on board, all of us, no hesitation.
Okay. So now, do you follow DC sports? Like, do you follow basketball at all?
A little bit, man. Look. All right. Now you going, all right, this might be blasphemous, right? But I have not followed sports that much over the past 4 years, man. And that hasn't always been the case. As you know, young kids, right? Young kids, busy job out here, getting in a PhD program, which, you know, I guess was a good idea, right? And so all of that stuff. And then honestly, to be real with you, when the Kaepernick stuff started popping off, man, I was getting just angry, man. That rage, which honestly, all of this, like that anger that we rightly have as black folks, right? In addition to that, like ADHD, neurodivergencies, it hypes up that anger, man. It kicks it up because there's like rejection sensitivity. We tend to be a little bit more emotional. And man, so like racist stuff, man, it just, I've had a lot of racist experiences in my life. When I see people experiencing racist experiences, I'm like, let's go, man. What do you need me to do for you? I'm here for you. So when I saw Cap go through that, it did something to me. The CTE stuff did something to me. I got a few close homeboys that played in the NFL. And so I played high school ball with and pretended like I was going to play college ball. And I was like, nah, I ain't doing this. And so like it backed me off. And then like the pandemic stuff. And I felt like people were forcing things too much, man. It was just enough. It was a perfect storm that I backed off. I'm always going to be a Baltimore Birds, man. The Orioles, I grew up watching the Orioles, man, in Old Memorial Stadium and then Camden Yards, you know, and then, you know, I played linebacker in high school, man. So Ray Lewis is my all-time favorite player. Like, I love Ray Lewis. Ed Reed's probably number 2. Shannon Sharp's probably number 3, right? So that's my squad, man. Like, I love it, but I'll be real with you, man. I don't know who is on teams anymore. I just like talking trash to you about your Cowboys on Twitter. As my uncle's a Cowboys.
I know. I don't know why so much, but you know, anytime you see the stars come up, you have to have no choice but to speak on it. But that's another story for that.
You live in Virginia, brother. You live in Virginia. Like, what's going on, man?
So listen, I tell this story all the time. And my homeboy Chris was on here last week. We always go back and forth because he's from Portland, right?
Okay.
And he's a Portland Trailblazer fan, but he's a Kansas City Chief fan. And I said, well, so he says, well, because I'm part of the DMV, I'm part of Virginia, even though they don't categorize Central Virginia with the DMV, it kind of goes back and forth. I am not a Washington fan. I grew up a Dallas fan. And so as a result of that, that was from my grandfathers. All 3 of my grandfathers were Dallas Cowboy fans. What happens? Makes me a Dallas Cowboy fan. Now, my dad, Pittsburgh fan. Pittsburgh fan.
Oh, man, we got to end this podcast right now, brother. You Cowboys, Steelers. Why am I here, man? What's going on?
Hey, I don't even know how he got to Pittsburgh, first of all. Anyway, but so that's how I became a Dallas fan. And so when we had that conversation, he was like, well, you should be a Washington fan. I'm like, but you should be a Seattle fan. And that's the whole beef between women and Portland.
Got him.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? He said, I can't. I'm the only one who can do that. I was like, okay, no. So that's how I became a Dallas fan. Now, basketball is different because I follow mostly players now since I traded my homeboy AI from Philly and big LeBron fan, of course. But
I love AI, man. I love AI.
That's my guy, man.
AI was just himself, man. He wasn't anyone but himself. And I love that for us. Like, when we get to be that, it's something special, man. It really is. This world will try to rob us of the identity that Black people have forged for ourselves, because if we are descended from enslaved Africans, we had to make this for ourselves. People don't get that, man. We didn't have a culture. We had to make a culture. We defined the United States culture. There's nothing more American than Black people, man. And so this system will try to rip that from us, man. So I love it when I see Black folks, period. But, you know, I'm a Black man, so especially when I get to see Black men out here just being their self. And that's what I have subscribed to be for the rest of my life, which is why I'm about to do more advertising for my practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's because, you know, and you talk about like the situation with John Moran and then like other athletes coming into those professional things. Like, one of my biggest things was like, you know how much weight that you put on these young Black kids going to these professional spaces, let alone the collegiate spaces, right? To be this upstanding citizen when they're still figuring the world out just as much as we are in our 20s, 30s, and 40s. You know what I'm saying? Right. So why do we hold them to a higher pedestal just because they got to these high ranks thinking that they should be, you know, do everything correctly when half of us not doing things correctly in our big adult age? You know what I'm saying? And so I hear you on that, because that's something that bothers me about that situation at times with our athletes, especially our student athletes and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, it feels a lot to me like, all right, we're giving y'all all this money, so you better act right because y'all don't deserve this, you know. So you better make sure you keep everyone comfortable. And I'm like, you're getting this money off the backs of our talent. And you know what? If we want to sign a ball in the end zone, man, then who cares? You know, we doing this for fun. It's a game, man. It's a game.
Exactly. And that whole notion of professionalism and what that means. And it's one of the things where like people like ask me like, okay, well, my locks, like one of the reasons I keep my locks, I've been locked up for like, I had locks for 16. Not locked up. Not locked up.
Yeah. Hey, which, hey, man, hey, you know, I got plenty of homeboys locked up and who have been, and that's no insult to that, but yeah, you got to specify the difference.
Got to specify these days. But I had my hair locked for about 16 years. And one of the reasons that I kept it locked, I've had that urge to cut it so many times, but one of the reasons was because that's one of my acts of resistance, right? Like, I was told in high school that I wouldn't be successful with long hair. You know what I'm saying? And so as a result of that, I'm like, well, I'm going to keep going, grinding, putting up in these spaces. And I'm also going to have locks as well. And I'm going to continue to do that and show guys, show people that I can do this, and I'm going to show my kids the same thing. Like, hey, you can have your long hair and still be successful and do what you want to do in this world. And so it's just one of those things about professionalism and, you know, these microaggressions and things like that around that. And it's just like, we can still be just as good, if not better, actually
100.
better. But our hair doesn't mean that we're less professional. You know what I'm saying? So
Right. It's part of identity that we get a craft. Excuse me. It's just like, man, I'm gonna tie all this together, right? So Morant, right? I feel for him because if I'm correct, I don't know all the details, excuse me, to the whole story, but he kind of like grew up in the suburbs and stuff, right?
That story keeps going back and forth. Some say it's the
Okay.
suburbs, some say it's rural, some say it's tough. I don't know.
Okay.
Somebody can say suburbs, rural. I don't know.
I grew up in the suburbs, man, and I'm not a small dude, man. So, but I've had like this warrior spirit, but I grew up in the burbs, right? And there's this thing where like I'm a third generation college student, man. My paternal grandma went to Virginia State University, man. She was a teacher for 30 plus years, brother. So like, yeah, right. Is that what your shirt is right there too?
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So, man. All right. So we fam. So you know, I grew up in the burbs, and adolescence is just a wild time in general, right? And so for me, there was nothing more than I wanted to feel more connected to my Black friends, right? My Black peers, my Black friends. So we actually moved from Maryland when I was in 9th grade, and we started 10th grade in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And that's really where I started having more Black friends, because I don't blame my parents for this. So I want to be clear, right? My dad started making some money. He's like, all right, we're going to make sure he goes to good schools. What does good schools typically mean? Good schools. It means white, right? And so I don't blame them. They're trying to do what they thought was right. What happened is I had decades worth of racist experiences that I really didn't start to unpack until I was in my 20s and 30s. And it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I want nothing to do with it. I want nothing to do with it. I want to deal with people who are authentic, even if they're white folk. I want people who be authentic. But man, I want to be in authentic Black spaces and do dope stuff for Black folks, and especially Black men, because I feel like we get ignored a lot. So when I saw the Morant stuff, I was like, okay, I feel for this brother. I see what he's doing. Right. I definitely have I had a very wild streak, right? I was hanging out with some homeboys, but I got to see another side of life too, man. I got to understand that better. And, through all of that is where I lost track of what we was talking about, man. This is going to happen a lot, brother. You're going to have to keep me on track. I'm going to veer off. I'm going to get wild.
Going. Okay. No, keep going. I got you. Don't worry. Keep going.
All right. I'm going to warn you. That's what I do, man. So for me, it was this point of understanding the depths of what my Blackness was, right? Because I actually know a lot about my family history, man. My great-great-great-grandfather on my dad's side, runaway slave, changed his name to Dodson to Dotson, fought in the Civil War, made it for the Union. Like, let's be clear, okay? Because the only Black people that was fighting for the Confederacy were slaves that were, forced to fight for the Confederacy, despite all these, fabrications out there. He made it through the Civil War alive. And with that money that he got, and some white dude took some of that money, but with that money that he got, he bought 62 acres of land in Glen Burnie, Maryland, Furnace Branch Road. You can validate all my stuff, right? And then my mom's family grew up right down the street from my dad's family. My mom's father was one of the not just first Black people to work for NASA, one of the first people to work for NASA. He didn't even have a college degree. The man was a genius. But now when I see this, he's clearly neurodivergent. My whole family is neurodivergent, right? And so I had this strong sense of what it meant to be Black from my family history. And I didn't realize how much of a privilege that was until I got older. Really, until I was hanging out with some of my homeboys in high school and stuff. And I was like, man, I got to respect this, man. Their life is so much different. And honestly, these brothers are smarter than me. I just had some extra advantages. They get some of this stuff way quicker than I do. And it changed my perspective, man. It changed my perspective for the better. These are homeboys for life. I still kick it with them today, right? And it's one of the reasons why I am what I am. So when I got through all my evolutions, through all my careers, that's a long story. But when I was at NC State and I was doing this career development stuff, after a while, I was like, you know what? No, man, I'm the representative. I'm representing what our Black students and specifically our Black male students look like. So I started
Right.
growing my hair out, man. I mean, it's a lot longer than it looks. I'm thinking I might do something with it, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but that's the whole reason why I do it, because when people see me, they see a brother my age, they see my hair, they see my glasses, they're like, oh, what does he do?
Yeah.
What does he
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
Sometimes if I wear a polo shirt with like the NC State logo on it, they think I'm a coach. Like, oh, are you a coach? I'm like, I ain't no damn coach, man.
First thing. First thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the identity piece of that. And I think like understanding you're right. Like bringing up the piece of you are privileged to have that, to know your full length of your Blackness and what that looked like. And I think for some of us, we don't, maybe because we didn't get passed down or we didn't have the opportunities. And then we go through this phase where we're trying to survive, trying to succeed, but we still don't know authentically who we are in of ourselves. And I feel like I had that kind of a transition period around that. I always had roots of it. But then like as I gotten older, like when my grandparents started, getting sick or ill or just, giving information that I was able to digest at a age that was digestible, you start to pick up and see these different things. Like my grandmother
Yeah.
was very prominent in the Stafford, Virginia's NAACP, right? But I never knew that until I started getting more involved in some of that social justice community-based work. And they was like, "Oh, you animate some grandson? Yeah. Oh, we love her." Da, da, da. And I was like, "Yo, wow!" Like I never knew that, and stuff. And so, and even in Caroline, like Caroline has a very distinct history around race and ethnicity. Of course, the Love and West Virginia case was from here in Bowling Green, Virginia.
Right, right.
Things like that. The Confederacy comes through here sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Like it's all these different things that's happened. And but also one of the things that don't get taught a lot. So I had to go out to like Fayetteville State. I went to Fayetteville State for 1 year and
Okay.
went there, did a class in African American history, really almost failed it because I didn't know my history.
Right.
Come back and go to college to find out all these different things about my history, my Black history, but also even my county and community that I came from and how influential they were in this race battle, stuff like that. And it's like some of that is hidden for a lot of us in the school system that we operate in. And if it's not told from an oral perspective from our family members or, loved ones, then we don't know it until we go on this journey to find it,
Right, right, man. I you said that really well, man. I love that because I love my dad's side of the family, and there's some dope people. Actually, one of my cousins, Black woman, owns her own civil engineering firm in DC's won awards. I mean, it's bad, right? And so like my dad's family, like they're big people. My mom's family are short people. Okay, I'm way taller than all of them. My dad's like 6'4". Everybody's big. They tall. They're loud. And they have a reputation. Like, so if anyone is like in Maryland or has been in Maryland for a long time, there used to be like this place called Dotson's Ribs and Dotson's Tavern. That's my family. That's my dad's side of the family.
Gotcha.
And so, man, I started figuring out when I got older, I don't think they really realized, or at least some of them, like how much like privilege that they had. And I'm not saying that like they were entitled or anything. I see why they had so much confidence, man. It was like Black elite. They was doing the thing. They had their own land. They had their own money. They hadn't to rely on any white people or anyone else for stuff. It was theirs. It was all theirs. And, because of the ways of this world, my dad's generation in the family had kind of gotten away from that. Not a negative thing. We had to go out here and get jobs and make it happen.
Right.
But with all this change, especially that the pandemic brought up, I'm like, no, we're gonna get back to this, man. We're gonna get back to this because I need my own, man. I'm not taking these orders half the time from people that don't know what they're talking about, don't want to listen to me. To be honest with you, people see all these accolades of mine on paper and this and that. It's not really who I am. I mean, it is at this point in time. I've become something new. And I don't want anyone to hear that who might be thinking they want to do this thing as a reason to not do it. No, do it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that I talk about was stuff I talked about before I don't have my PhD yet, before I was a PhD candidate.
Right.
But now all of a sudden people listen, right? Now all of a sudden people give me the benefit of doubt and they want to care, but they didn't care 5 years ago, The main reason why I got a PhD is because it gives me flexibility. I can write. I love to write. whether nonfiction or fiction. You know, I can leverage myself in a bunch of different spaces. But I know when I walk through the door and someone's like, "Oh, you know, what's your name?" Like, Dr. Wade. You know, well,
Boom.
when that happens, yeah. But you know, it hits different, man. And I get that initial respect that I want, and that's honestly, you know, what I did. And this is one of the reasons why I love our culture, man. I love hip hop. I love what we do because it's brothers and sisters and everybody else doing their thing, being authentic. Respect me, man. Respect my lane. Respect where I'm coming from, and listen to my story. And you know what? If you don't, then bye.
Yeah,
right. I love that energy, man.
Yeah,
Come on.
you move on. That's one of the reasons why I jumped to private practice, to do my own thing, to work with Black men and Black women, particularly with Black men as well. And because like I got through all these situations where same bureaucracy, same type of thing in every agency, since even back to when I was working at the bagel shop in the hospital. You know what I'm saying? Same type of stuff. You still got to answer to what they want. And even if you bring up changes, you bring up things that make sense, it's like, oh, well, no, we might take that into account, but it still works this way. And, you know, at the end of it, like, going to the pandemic, it was just like, you know, well, I want to do my private practice. I want to work with Black people. I want to be a voice. I got the license. I seen the power of doing it right in a way that makes sense, looks right for us, with one of my groups I was doing for Black men called the Goodfellas Project. And I said, okay, well, if I can take that and make that individualistic, then yeah, this is a no brainer. And so I'm proud of that, right? Because I can say that I did. And who's to say, even it kind of sounds nuts to even say that we did, you've done something in a very unique way, specific way that has not really been done before. A private practice, virtual, in the pandemic, for Black men and Black women, you know what I'm saying, doing therapy. And that's something that I hang my hat on with. But it's like, I had to do that to be my unique self and to break away from some of these things that I felt like was stifling me. And I still did it in my own Black way. That's how I show up to work most of the time. And even when I'm teaching on campus, when I'm at Virginia State, you know what I'm saying, I still show up to work the same way. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's something about being your authentic Black self in these Black spaces and doing the Black work that you want to do with, you know, Black people and stuff like that. So I definitely,
it's powerful. It makes you feel like a superhero, man.
It does. It really does. And I felt it for the first time. I felt it in the past, but I really felt it one day when I was I was on campus and I was in my office, and this student that came up, he wanted to switch to the social work program. So I had already had like 2 sessions that day. I was working on something for a class, and he came in, and me and my colleague convinced him to come to the social work program. And it was like, and I'm surrounded by Black professionals, Black doctors, and all this stuff like that. And this kid comes in, and he just trying to find his direction, but he comes in, he said, I want to become a social work student based upon, because I see y'all, you got locks, you dressing like this, you got a doctorate. And I was just like, yo, this is it. This is it. You know, this is it. I just got off my Black practice, seeing my Black clients and doing stuff like that. Piece of it is just a different experience, man. That it was almost like tearful, almost, you know.
I got 2 questions for you, man.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna need your help so I can remember the second one, because we might get into something. So the second one, oh man, I don't know. I forgot the second. See, this is like I like to talk about this stuff in real time so people can see what it is. So I'm ADHD, right? So one of the things that is very typical with ADHD is poor working memory, right? We have long-term memory, we have short-term memory, we have working memory. My long-term memory is abnormally good. It's one of the reasons why I've been able to push my way through school, because I remember pretty much everything that I hear almost. I mean, my memory is not perfect. I'm a human. I forget many things. Okay, my wife will tell you that. But I also remember a lot. My first memory is from when I was 1 year old, man. I have a ridiculous long-term memory. But my working memory, man, I'll be sitting here talking, forget what I was talking about mid-sentence. It happens all the time, right? And that's okay, because I have other strengths. It's not, everything is not working memory. So when these things happen, when I'm working with clients, I call it out in person so they can see it and they can know what that is when they experience it for themselves and not be ashamed or embarrassed of it. Hey, man, that's how my brain works. I bet you my brain works really well in some other ways, better than these other folks, you know? So we shouldn't sweat it. Anyway, so I forgot what question 2 is, but question 1, you said you was working at a bagel shop in the hospital. I had a high school job at a hospital, and it was nothing pretty. It was nothing pretty. What hospital? If you, it's okay if you don't want to say, but what was it like, man? What was that bagel job like?
That was my like first official job in high school. Doing like at Einstein Bagels, doing food service, and I was running register, I was making sandwiches, I was doing prep work, I was cleaning, all of that. And I did that on and off mostly probably through maybe junior, senior year, and all of my undergrad time. That's where I was doing food service and working in my bagel shop. And so that was one of those situations where, you know, I was tired of doing it, but my customer service skills, that skill translated over into me being a mental health professional and therapist.
100%. People devalue that. Those skills are important, man. Yeah. You learn a lot from those part-time jobs, man.
Yeah. So it helped a lot. But of course, you don't want to work in the bagel shop. I was working. Sometimes I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to go do prep work and come back at 12 o'clock. That was one of my schedules. And sometimes they were flexible. They helped out. I will say this: they were super helpful in building, one, my cash flow, but also having a job to work to while in school. And I had some soft skills that helped me become the therapist that I am, or the clinician I am today. But yeah, it's a bagel shop. Like, you know,
it sounded like you had a much better experience.
Yeah. Well, you know what? The thing about it too, like I had people in leadership that like knew my family and stuff like that too.
Oh, that's different.
So like everybody from the area kind of worked up there in Mary Washington. You know what I'm saying? So,
so I've had a lot of jobs throughout my life. Like, let's just talk about like before undergrad. My very first job, this was under the table. I was 8 or 9 years old. My pep, my maternal grandfather, who I talked about, when he retired from NASA, he had inherited a cemetery. It's in I forget what city in Maryland. It's called St. Rest Cemetery. Okay. And my job was to dig and fill graves and to direct funeral traffic with my grandfather. He had a backhoe. He refused to use the backhoe. He only used his black hands and his shovel to dig these graves, man.
Gosh.
In the Maryland heat, and I'd be up there like dying, man, just working. Also like scared. I would try to work fast so it wasn't in the evening. I'm like, man, we don't.
All those things.
All these things, man. I delivered coupons for pizza bowlies in Maryland. They would drop us off in the middle of a neighborhood, and we'd have a backpack, and they put a stack of coupons in there, and they give us like a sub and Hawaiian punch. We was wild. I've always been kind of wild, man. And so like we would deliver a few of them.
Yeah.
And then after a while, I'm like, man, we ain't delivering these. We take the stack, like throw them in the trash. Yeah. Just eat the food and bounce. But also like there was this anxiety that I had about going and knocking on these doors in a suburb. It was in Croydon. These are mostly white homes. I was like 12 at that time, and I've been 5'11" since 8th grade, right? I've not gotten any taller since 8th grade. So I was close to that at 12. I was big. I was like, I don't like this, right? And I didn't really have the language to put behind it. So from other people's perspective, oh, he's just a delinquent. It's just wild. But in reality, I was anxious about racism, man, you know, and that's a very real concern. Okay. And so I had a bunch of other jobs. I had this one job at Kaufman Seafood in Gambrills, Maryland. I remember I got into this argument with this brother from the Barbados because he couldn't say my name and he was yelling at me. He, instead of saying Wesley, he would say, Wiggly, 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 why you cut these vegetables over here? Wiggly, Wiggly. And man, I lost it. I lost it one day. I was like, damn it, Charles. And I was up there. I threw it. Man, I'm sorry. I'm over here cussing on your podcast.
You're good.
I threw the thing down threw a plate down. I was like, I was 14 at that. That was my first paid, like legitimate over the table paid job. And I was like, man, you ain't nobody get my face, man. You won't get my face, blah, blah, blah. Man, Charles stopped that real quick.
real
quick.
Relax.
So anyway, man.
Cut your tone down, Charles.
Cut the tone down, Charles. My name ain't Wiggly, boy, right? I mean, you understand, man. You hear like my dad's family, man. My dad is 6'4". His confidence out the yin yang. He wrote a best-selling novel in the early 90s. He's a brilliant dude.
Wow.
And he's a country dude, but he's a brilliant dude. And he's a brother, so he's smooth, man. I have always tried to emulate that confidence that my dad has had his whole life. I feel like I just really have it right now at 40, and I had to get all this other stuff to get close to that 6'4" black man confidence that he has. But he instilled that in me. So even when I was scared, man, he was like, don't ever let somebody disrespect your name.
Yeah.
This man was calling me Wiggly. And I could just hear my dad like, nah, man, you got to let him know.
Yeah, you got to address that. Yeah, that's something like something my pops would say too. Like, what?
Right.
No, you got to stand up and address that, bro. But my pops is kind of similar, like this loud, boisterous, ain't going to tolerate a lot of disrespect. He's your man's man. When
old school brother, man.
Old school. Yeah.
Right. And there's good and bad with that. But you know what? As a black boy growing up in this world, it's a lot more good with that, man. I needed that. I needed to know I had this man in my corner, man, who was able to look at me and be like, look, man, don't you ever let anybody do that to you, man. That boy say something stupid to you. This was like in school. Okay. I'm going to get back to the hospital, man. I got to tell you this. This was hilarious. For 2 years, we lived in Palo Alto, California, right? I was born in 82, man. I was like 4 through 6. And I was a really shy little kid. I was a really, really shy little kid. Okay. It probably goes into some of the neurodivergent stuff too. But like, I remember there was, not a lot of black folks. That's when I really started seeing a lot of racism. We were living in Baltimore and then we moved to Palo Alto. We couldn't even find a place to get our hair cut. And I remember watching the way these people were talking to my dad. No, we don't cut your hair. I was just like, and I was like, my dad held it together because he had his son there. And I was just thinking in my head, like, what would happen if I wasn't there? So anyway, this little boy at the kindergarten I was at, man, I don't know, he said something to me and it was racist. And I told my dad about it. He was like, man, you look at that boy. He tries to mess with you because he had like tried to intimidate me. He was like Swiss. He was huge. He was a huge little kid, man. He was like, you look at that boy in the face, you smack him across the face. I do not give this advice now, right? Okay, right? This was what happened. This was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Man, I went to class and that boy ain't say nothing but like, hey, Wes. And I went, boom, man. Oh, no, I done lost my headphones.
You just said, hey, Wes, I said, forget it.
Because I was scared, right? But I was more scared of my dad, but I also respected my dad. And I knew that he was right, even if he wasn't. I was just like, nah, man, I got to do this. Boy ain't never say nothing again. This is not the advice that I give in 2023. This is not the therapeutic advice
that therapists give. We do give, but this is our reality.
It's a meaningful story. It's a meaningful anecdote to understand like these evolutions that we go through as black boys, the black youth, the black men. And there's some of these lessons that we have are just, they have to be different,
But
and
that brings up a quick question before we go on to that, because you said two things. You said some of the neurodiversity tendencies about being shy, but then also reacting not so much out of fear of the boy, but fear of your dad, but still kind of not processing fully, it sounds like, what's happened. Just know I need to do something.
Right.
Elaborate on that a little bit, because I feel like when we start talking about black boys and behaviors, right, we automatically want to assume that they're just not listening, or they're just not, they're just being delinquent or being, who they are, little boys. Kind of expound upon that a little bit more around that, because in that situation, how would one know really what's happening and what's going on in that little boy's mind?
That question you asked right there lets me know you were a really dope therapist, man, because you heard all this stuff I was saying. You heard that little thing. You picked it out. You connected it to something else. I see you, brother.
Yeah.
I see you, man. Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a lot of things there. One, I know plenty of folks ain't gonna like this, okay? I'm not like a spanking advocate, okay? Now, I don't tear people down for spanking either, right? It's a little bit different in our culture as black folks, and I understand it. Even I have 2 girls. Even if I had 2 boys, I wouldn't be spanking them. One of my like dinner party questions I would ask people is like, hey man, did you get spanked when you grew up? And they're like, yeah, I got spanked when I grew up.
Me too.
And so I was like, did you get spanked more or less than your parents did? The answer was always less, right? So what about your parents? Did they get spanked more or less than their parents? They was like, oh yeah, probably less. And I was like, so then why does it seem that there's this evolution that we continue to spank our kids less and less, right? Maybe because it's not that good, right? There's we feel a certain way about it and we want to do it less. And so my dad did spank me. He was big. And so there was some fear from that. And
Right.
so something else too, like with neurodivergencies, a lot of times there's always some level of sensory sensitivity, whether you're autistic, whether you're ADHD or whatever. And it can be to the degree, especially if you're autistic, to the degree that you are completely like just debilitated from like sensory overload, right? To where it can just be a nuisance to where you can't do anything. When I have like my more ADHD moments, very scientific term there, my sensory gets very sensitive. So during the pandemic, when I had some hardships, right, and I was like in home, I wasn't getting a lot of stimulus because ADHD brains need stimulus. They need stimulus. And so when I didn't get it, I started seeing my ADHD traits like continue to crank up, 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 up. And so it actually looked like I was more autistic on the surface from like my presentations, like my sensory sensitivities were going through the roof. As a little kid, when you're just starting to process this body that you're in and your brain and all this other sensory stuff, it's kind of similar to that. So I would have these overwhelming moments of sensory where I would just clam up and get real quiet. And the teachers, typically white teachers around me, almost always would be like, well, he's just not listening. He's just being insubordinate. I was scared, man. I was scared. I was intimidated. I didn't know what was going on, but they didn't see me as scared. They didn't see me as needing some time and some headphones to go sit in a quiet room. They just saw me as like, this little black boy is a problem. We're going to put him over here. Right. And that, and I think that's what happens a lot.
Got you. That makes a lot of sense. And the other question around that is that if you do act out, or you do kind of, when that sensory overload is too much and you do maybe say you react, then it's also the other piece of, oh, well, that he's a problem child, or he's just not, he's also not listening and insubordinate. And also for Black families, right? I imagine you saying, if you shutting down, you got a sensory overload and you go into the corner if you don't know what to say, and your dad or mom says, oh, well, what you got to say? You don't want to say nothing about that? And that it heightens it even more because you're already scared of them, and it takes it to another level. And so that's the reason why I asked, because I'm not just saying that from the educators and the professionals that are working with Black boys and Black men, but also as Black families and Black parents. When your child is going through that, this is a sensitive time for them growing up as they're learning their emotions and feelings. But also, if there is neurodiversity there, then there is an extra layer that you have to also be aware of yourself. And a lot of times for us as parents, I think this is one thing I always say: parenting exposes the things that you have not worked on within yourself.
Yes. Say that again, man. Say that again for the people in the back.
Parenting exposes the things that you have not worked on within yourself. And I say that because you are dealing with a child who is new to the world. So they don't know any of these things. So you have to be really aware and patient and what's going on around that. And if there's something else that's there, you need to also be aware of that too. And so this is where I feel like, a lot of times when parents talk about, and this is when I even have conversations with parents when they in the community, and we're like, okay, well, what can we do with the youth? Or how can we talk to the youth and get them to do this and that and the third? And I'm like, have y'all took the time to listen, to share, to not just reprimand, and to not just try to correct, but also have a lending ear, lending shoulder, and take a seat back and listen to what these children or kids are saying. And then working from there versus just reacting and trying to protect when you're not really solving the problem,
Man, that's you're on point, brother. You were on point. The neurodivergence piece, right? So if a kid is neurodivergent, they're going to have some sensory stuff. So if they have like heightened sensory needs and you're spanking them, it's a traumatic experience, man. And I'll tell you, for me, it was a traumatic experience. You know what happens after you experience that trauma? You say, this won't happen again. So you know what happened, man? I got really good at hiding stuff. Boy, I was James Bond, man. You know how wild I was, man. We was in high school. My dad had this 91, 92 Jeep Cherokee stick shift, man. This was like just his little old car that he had. I ended up getting when I was a teenager, like later, so I could drive. Man, he was going on business. I put that thing in neutral, pushed it out into the driveway, and I would pick up my homeboys in it and stuff. I looked like I was in college, so I could figure out how to drive. I did, you know how on a Black album, Jay-Z's mom's like, he didn't even learn how he just hopped on a bike and started road.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I learned how to ride a bike. I can figure, this is like the ADHD mind, man. I can figure anything out if I'm interested in it. Anything, man.
Right.
I didn't learn how to ride a bike. I saw my friends were riding a bike, and I wanted to ride. And I remember the boy's name. His name was Peter Amadusi. It was in Palo Alto, California. It was this little white dude. We was good friends. He's like, I got an extra bike, Wes. And I just didn't want to be left behind. And I was like, okay, I know how to ride my big wheel. I just hopped on that bike like it was like I've rode one my whole life. And just no one taught me how to ride a bike. That's also one of the greatest undoings for me too, is that when you can teach yourself things really well that you're interested in, and you are, from my experience, Black and a Black man, and you're pushed to the margins frequently because people don't see you fully and they don't understand you, you become very like hyper independent. And my parents kind of raised me to be hyper independent. And so it took me into my 30s to realize, like that old African proverb, like, okay, I can go fast by myself, but if I want to go far, I got to go with others. And I wasn't conditioned to working well with other people because I had to do everything on my own to try to figure that. And I don't mean like solely, everyone has help. My parents helped me out plenty in my life. Okay. I'm not pull up for the bootstraps. My parents helped me out plenty. Okay. But I still had to do a lot of things on my own. And so going back to the parenting piece, it's you raising a kid like that, right? If we aren't thinking about how we think, metacognition, right? Then we're just going to fall into the same behaviors, better or worse, that our parents did, because that's what we know, right? It's to quote both of our beloved players, practice. We talk about practice, right? The only practice you get in parenting was your own childhood. So that is what you're going to default to if you don't spend time thinking about, why do I think like that? Okay, well, hey, I think I'm gonna spank my kid, but why do I think that's okay?
Why do I think that's okay?
Like thinking about my thought process, thinking about how to be a parent. Not just I'm a father, but I'm a father. I'm one half of a team. I got to think about how the wife thinks too. And we grew up very different. We have two very different backgrounds, man. I had a pretty privileged background. She had complete opposite background, man. Like first generation college student, pops in prison, all this sort of stuff. Ain't my stories. So I ain't telling most of it on here, but there's a lot more to it. And so just survival instincts and mentality is much stronger in her, and it's a huge strength until it's not. My hyper independence is a huge strength until it's not, right? And so we have to think about why we think the way we do when it comes to parenting. How does that affect not just us as individual parents, but this system that we have? Because a home is a family system, as you know, right? So yeah, man, that's what you just said is 100% on point. I love that.
Yeah. And so another thing that pops up too is that, you talk about a feeling of a sense of not being left out. And I feel like a lot of times for us as Black men, a lot of that us reacting or behaviors is one of those things of fear of being missing out or fear of being left out. But then at the same time, like, what else is going on, right? Like, what else is there that is, triggering that or activating that, I'm sorry, and making that happen for us that maybe has nothing to do with that current situation, but all to do with past experiences or traumas or things that we have maybe experienced in the household. And it's one of the things I always tell community leaders or in the community about, where does this behavior come from? I'm like, hey, if you're looking in the household or you're looking in the school system around socially, look at those two places first before just judging and coming up with whatever you want to come up with, because those are the two most influential places, right? And so if my parents is not aware and they're judging or trying to parent based upon how they don't want to be the parents of their own parents, or I said that kind of wrong, but how they were parented and they don't want to be that for you, or they don't know any better, so I'm going to do this to my child, then we had talking about two different scenarios with that.
Right.
But I want you to also define for everybody that's listening and watching what neurodiversity is. And then I want you to define it for what neurodiversity is for Black boys and Black men.
Okay. Yeah. Neurodiversity is a theory. right? It's a theory coined by Judy Singer. Neurodiversity is the idea that everybody's brain is different.
Right.
Everybody's brain is different, right? And that is a fact. And while one brain might have strengths and be better in a certain situation, another brain has different strengths and is better in a different situation. There is no one type of brain that is better, period, right? But like we have in our culture, we have a lot. When I say our culture, I mean the US culture as a whole, and I want to say the world culture, but the US, we have hierarchies for like everything. We have racial hierarchies, we have, class hierarchies, we have educational hierarchies, we all this sort of stuff. And there's psychological, cognitive hierarchies as well. And so we tend to privilege people who what we would say is neurotypical, meaning that they have the statistically normal representation. I say statistically normal because it's not there is no normal, right? It's just, this is what we see most commonly in people. And honestly, I only think we see that more commonly because that's what we test for, and the tests tend to not be culturally specific. So anyway, it just means that, hey, people got different brains, right? No one brain is better than the other brain. And let's advocate for this so that people know. That's what neurodiversity is about. Now, within neurodiversity, I said neurotypical. These are people who don't have any kind of neurodivergent conditions. And then neurodivergent is people who do have neurodivergent conditions. The other thing that I love about neurodiversity is it is a strengths-based model. And especially as Black folks, we should run from anything that is a deficit-based model. It doesn't mean that like addressing your weaknesses are not important, right? But I think I just said this story the other day on my little like videos that I was doing. This happened years ago where I had a manager. He's a nice guy, man, but he was trying to get me to like do more at this job, right? Even though I was doing really well, but they had these certain metrics of like, oh, you need to make this. This was my corporate career. You need to make $70 a day. I only made 30. But I spent 2 hours more on the phone with potential clients than the people who made 70 dials. So why do you care? And I'm closing deals. And when I closed those deals, they were better clients because I got to know them better, right? So that was my strength. So he was trying to say like, yeah, but imagine how much you would do if you made 70 dials. And so he was a big NBA fan. This was like 2012, 2013. And I was like, look, man, you wouldn't go up to Shaq and be like, Shaq, man, you're doing great. But if you could just hit that three like Kobe, man, you could do so much better. You wouldn't do that, right? And you wouldn't do the same to Kobe, rest in peace, right? But like you wouldn't do the same to Kobe. Like, man, Kobe, you just bulk up a little bit and like hit that post like, Shaq could. You don't do that. We look at our strengths. Does that mean that Kobe and Shaq never developed their weaknesses? No, but they doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on their strengths, right? So neurodiversity is like, look, we need to look at this stuff from a strengths-based perspective. A lot of the medical model, which is how we get diagnosed, is, hey, this is a problem. You need to cure this problem. Here's some medication to cure it. Here's some ways to fix it. Here's a therapy style ABA that says you should be like this, and we're going to show you how you can be like this. Instead of saying, let's understand who you are and what you're good at. And let's figure out those things that you're good at, and let's expand on those things that you're good at. Hey, I'll help you with some of the executive functioning stuff. It's like managing your day and your schedules, and stuff like that. Like, we'll help you get better on that. But helping you get better in that through your strengths is really what it's about, because that's how we learn, right? We learn through the things that we're good at. We gravitate towards that. You look at people who are hyper successful, they have doubled down on their strengths, right? So that's neurodiversity. That's about as succinct as I could do it. For Black folks, we need strength-based models, right? And for Black folks, we get left out in the neurodiversity conversation a lot. And look, I mean, I'm gonna keep it 100, like all the way 100. A lot of neurodiversity conversations are very white-centered, and people argue about language. They don't like labels, and they try to figure this out. I'm Black. I can't erase my label. I'm Black when I walk in the room. So I'm very comfortable with this label. All right. I'm just like, y'all just got to get over the fact that some people got labels. Okay. Yeah, you got a label. You're just not used to that because you're white. You don't think about white as being a race. You think of it as a default, right? I have a label. I'm comfortable with it. So, since the 70s and before, but there was like a big movement within like Black psychology for a push towards more strength-based models. So for us as Black folks, we don't have to get like too caught up in the whole like, oh, this isn't a disability, this is just an identity. It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter if you see it as a disability or a point of identity, because that's an argument within the neurodiversity piece. All that you need to know is that you're not broken. Okay.
Yeah,
Like your brain works. Not only does it work really well on certain things.
Yeah.
And some things, it's a little like the weaknesses are pretty prominent. There's a big disparity between our strengths and weaknesses for neurodivergent folks. For someone who's neurotypical, your strengths and weaknesses are going to be closer, right? There's not that big a difference. Like for me, working memory, right? I was taught my long-term memory is freakishly good, right?
Yeah.
My working memory, not so much, right? There's a big disparity between those things. So when I do things like writing, I have to read the prompt like 50 times because I keep forgetting in mid-paragraph what I'm writing about and stuff, right? And so what it also looks like for us is when people experience anxiety and trauma and depression, which I think is just a natural part of the Black experience in the United States, it's going to exacerbate all of these things. So we need to protect our children, especially, well, I'm not going to say especially, we need to protect all of our children. I have a special heart for Black boys and Black men, not because I personally feel that like we're more subjugated than, Black women or, Black non-binary folks, right? They have a whole different thing going on. And honestly, I feel like they have more going on than we do.
Yeah.
But we get ignored a lot, man. We get lumped into this category of men. I'm guilty of it myself sometimes. Look, sometimes everybody needs to be called out. Okay. There's plenty of brothers doing dumb stuff. But like,
yes.
I say this all the time, man, I'm not a man that happens to be Black. I'm a Black man. That means something very different, man. 1 in 5 Black men experience sexual assault. Black men get told to be quiet and smile more. Black men get told that our accomplishments, when we speak about them proudly, don't matter. We're being braggadocious. Black men, you talk about all these, which DI is great. I love DI. We need more of it. But a lot of these DI initiatives that look at wage disparities, it centers women. And you hear white women being the loudest. White women making more money than everybody almost, except for white men and Asian men. And so like Black men in those studies, Black women and like Latina and Hispanic women are the only groups that make less than Black men. But we're not in those conversations. We get left out of this. And you know what? Look, man, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. So what does neurodiversity mean for Black folks? It means this is an area of our intelligence. And it's an area of our intelligence that we should respect. And so here's another thing. Okay, I know I'm being a little long-winded here, but this is important. So racial trauma is a real thing, right? We experience a lot of racial trauma coming up. And so a lot of times ADHD can mimic can mimic trauma, can mimic PTSD, can mimic traumatic experiences. People don't respect what racial trauma does to people. I know plenty of folks who were in the military. They had a lot of people who had PTSD from the military had PTSD before they entered the military. Okay. And when you talk about folks who grew up with all this racial trauma, that's PTSD. Whether you want to call it post-traumatic slave syndrome, like Dr. Joyce DeGruy said, or something else, it's all real. Right. And regardless if it's a trauma presentation that looks like ADHD or it really is ADHD, we treat them the same way. We treat them the same daggone way. So I personally feel a lot of Black folks, I feel like a higher percentage of Black folks are neurodivergent. That's a personal theory that I have. I would like to spend some more time working on that. But I think some of that comes from the trauma that a lot of us experience in this. I know Tim Scott doesn't believe this, but this racist country that we live in, right? And people don't understand the complexities that come with that. I love this country and I hate this country at the same time. White people will get mad. And I feel like I'm ragging on white. I have many white friends. I have Black friends. But the godfather of my children is a white man I've been friends with since 4th grade. I'm the godfather of his kids. Like this, I don't hate white people. I don't dislike white people. I dislike racist people. Okay. And a lot of white people tend to be intentionally racist. Like we can make little racist mistakes here and there, but some people correct. Oh, my bad. I see what I did. Got it. Right. That's cool. We all do things wrong. Right. Anyway, look, working memory. What the heck was I talking about, man? Keep me on track.
You were talking about like just far as neurodiversity in the Black community, and the other question I asked was like around us as Black boys and Black men. But I'm gonna pause you right there because I want to
Okay.
ask, because you brought up a good point. The theory around all of us are due to the racial traumas and racism that we experience in this country. You said it's a theory around, you think that we're all neurodiverse in some fashion. And that was one of the questions that popped up to me, because I know trauma and those negative experiences like that can aid into neurodiverse, because you think in a different way because of your experiences. And for us as Black folks, due to our creativities, due to the way we, deal with certain situations, how we see situations, how we persevere, how we attack problems, right? What expand upon that theory around that? Because I feel like, it's some variations of that, and maybe neurodiversity is something deeper for us as Black people, like how we separate BIPOC from just as Black and then as people of color, right? You know what I'm saying? Is it something around that, you think? Because I feel like we see the world differently, than
I
everybody else.
definitely do.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole. These are just like opinions of mine at this point in time, but like, I feel like the idea of neurodiversity is. Let me back up, right? So just because someone coins something and comes up with it doesn't mean it hasn't always existed. Social science is hard for lay folks to grasp because it's not like biology where you're like, these are the cells, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Social science is pointing out the things that we've always been doing, but we don't really understand and we don't have a name for it, right? So this has always been the case. So I feel like Black folks have used neurodiversity as unintentionally, just it's a survival mechanism. This is how we survive, right? I was saying it earlier. No, we didn't have our culture. Like, enslaved Africans came over here and we had everything stripped from us, language, everything. But we still not just survive, we thrive. We figured out ways. That comes from leveraging other strengths, right? And I think those strengths were neurodivergent strengths. If someone's going through an extreme trauma on that level, your executive functioning is not at its true form, right? None of your strengths are at their true form. You have to start relying on other areas that you might not rely on. And I think that's where a lot of the neurodivergence that we see in Black folks comes up. Now, I don't think like every Black person is neurodivergent. I think we have a much higher percentage because of that, right? And we know that people laughed at Black folks when they said that decades ago, but now science supports it. There's a lot of research that shows like that significant traumatic experiences are passed down genetically, right?
Yes, yeah.
But people laughed at Dr. Joyce DeGruy when she talked about post-traumatic slave syndrome. Oh man, it's just Black people complaining, blah, 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 wanting more. But now science supports that, right? Now we know weathering also supports that because our telomeres get weathered down from all this racist trauma that we go through and stuff, right? And so I think that that's where neurodiversity really comes from when it comes from Black. But let me back up. We're all people, right? And so whatever we see in Black people can be present in anyone else, but they just haven't been through the same circumstances, right?
Exactly.
And I think that gets lost too. But so when I think people forget that. Like when we say, oh, Black people, we're not saying that like we're biologically different, because we're not, right? But we are socially different from a constructed reality that wasn't ours, that we had to figure out how to thrive in. And make some people uncomfortable. We want to take that back.
Exactly. And I think that the response to, because you talk about like, I work with Black men in therapy, and get asked a question of how you engage with Black men in therapy. And I talk about like, well, I speak the language, right? Speak the language. And I also, not just from a look standpoint, but from a conversation standpoint. And I'm talking about not even just conversation face to face, but when they go to my website, when they go read my books, right? I talk from that language, right? And that grabs their attention. So when you talk about marketing or talking about just like with somebody that's non-Black, that working with that individual, if you're not speaking that language and also there's some bias and some judgment, then how trauma informed or how, aware are you of these things? And as you were talking, I was thinking about, because we talking about Allen Iverson, right? And if you know the practice speech, everybody gets, and now it's funny, they made a commercial about Kevin Hart and Steph Curry and stuff like that. I thought that was dope. But if you know the history behind that, his homeboy got killed, right?
Right.
So that trauma was projected to this reporter in that area, right? that asked that question about practice, and AI wasn't thinking about practice, right? But that clip has for years now, and it's still some people that don't even know the history behind it, has been this calling card for AI the thug, or AI the aggressive black man, or whatever in sports. And it's like, this is how he has known or not known how to express his emotions or feelings and what he is going through. And for some reason, we have taken upon ourselves to just judge him and not ask what was going on, or what's the reason. How do I approach him? How do I help better him? How do I point to his strengths, or how do I help with what's going on, versus just saying, oh, well, AI just don't want to practice no more. He don't want to do this. He don't want to do that. No, he lost a loved one. And so I think that piece right there is understanding how socially, you said, black people, especially black men and boys, how they interact with the world, and how sometimes they've removed themselves to not interact with the world because of fear, survival, fight or flight or freeze. And if you're not really understanding that, or you're not taking the time to really look at that when you're working with them, whether it's in your corporate setting or whether it's in your healthcare setting, then you are not doing the service. You're doing a disservice to that client or that person in treatment or whatever it might be, or as an employer. That's, I just think about that situation. A lot of people don't really even understand why he said what he said.
Brother, I'm so glad that you said that, man. I mean, it's yes. Like I want people to rewind that, listen to that, write it down, soak it in, because our needs, our psychological safety is ignored. People don't want to listen to our psychological safety. After Trump was elected, there was this group that I used to go to with some of my homeboys. It was called Racial Harmony in Christ. There were some good things that happened from that group. But if I'm being real, a lot of it was just like a white guilt group. White people who voted for Trump wanted to feel like that they weren't bad people. There were some good people in that group. There's some people I became friends with that I will always be friends with. I don't want to act like everyone was bad. It was cool. It was overall, it was a very good experience. But like one of the things that I would say in it was, you saw, and we have seen this in recent news, right? You see some white veteran, if he's at a Starbucks and he's flipping out, but he has his uniform on, like, oh, hey, everyone, he's a veteran, he's been through some stuff. Hey, it's okay, right? But if you see a black man, honestly, anyone who's black, but we'll say especially a black man, because we instill a different level of fear than other black people do, right? Especially when we're large, right? And I'm not, I'm a lighter skinned black man, but I'm not small, man. So I like looking a little intimidating sometimes. So
I've leaned into it at this point, bro.
I feel like it's our right. We have to keep that right too, because okay, you want to put me in this box? Sure, I got all these degrees, I got all this, but guess what? Hey, try me. Try.
I've leaned. I've not to pause you right there, but I've leaned into that because there's always this intimidation factor. There's always, I fit the stereotype, things like that. And it's like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm gonna be me. I can't. God gave me height. He gave me these broad shoulders. It is what it is. I got long hair. If you come talk to me, it's a different conversation. But I might have a face on where I don't feel like I'm gonna be bothered either, and that's cool too. So I'm sorry.
It's 100% cool. So, so you have a brother, same brother at the Starbucks, who's just been through what AI went through with some racist stuff, and he flips out. Oh, we got to get him out of here. I mean, we know that they'll get him out of there for even less, right? Just having a coffee quietly, right? But that's real, man. Our psychological safety does not get centered. It does not get privileged, and I love it. That's why. That's one of the reasons why I love hip hop, man. I love hip hop because it's a giant middle finger to all of that. I feel it.
Exactly, and I think that's the piece of it, that looking at that, so then you have to, when you start talking about being aware or being open and trying to engage with that DEI side and trying to be more equitable, because every time you were talking about it, I just heard equity. Shout out to my homeboy, Dr. Bell. Equity Matters, coined that, his podcast, but it sounds like the equity piece of it. And I feel like until we really have a soft chance to be heard in that capacity, right, then we're not going to make the progress that we need to make. And you're not going to be able to serve those individuals who need that, because you're unwilling, or whoever is unwilling, to engage with them in a holistic way that analyzes, that says, this is how we see the world, and we're not, and you try to make us conform to something that is the normal world or whatever, then it makes us uncomfortable, and then we lose ourselves in that, and then that's another separate issue, you know. So I think that's very important, man. That's very important on that, because if not, then what are we doing? You know,
I'm about to be proud of myself here because I remembered something. I'm gonna tie this back to what you just said. The hospital story. I worked at UNC in the kitchen at UNC hospitals for a while. Okay. And I worked there because a bunch of my homeboys, some black men that I was friends with. And I also meant to say this, like, I'm a very eclectic person. I did martial arts. I played soccer. When I came to now, my martial arts school was dope. I got to give a moment to say something about that. It was in pre-gentrified Silver Spring, Maryland. It was a black martial arts school. Everyone was black, or they were Puerto Rican, or they were Jewish. Okay, our Sifu was black. My pops was in there with me. There's a homeboy from there who left that school and went to Buds and became a Navy SEAL, and he attributed everything that we learned in that school. We had a dude who came in there who thought he was bad. He just came out of boot camp from Paris Island, from the Marines. He came up. Man, he got literally thrown through a drywall wall, like thrown through a wall by the smallest dude in their whole thing. He packed up and left. It was real, man. That's one of the reasons why I'm a real dude now. We had a 400-pound punching bag, man. If you know how to rock a 400-pound punching bag, a lot of fear starts going away, right? You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I did a lot of things, man. So like when I came to North Carolina, I do think it's also important for me to say that my pops made sure I did that stuff. My pops made sure his boys were confident. That was one of his number one concerns. I got to have confident boys who know how to defend themselves and know how to use their brain. I always loved my pops for that. So when we came to North Carolina, I originally grew up in Maryland, man. Everybody played lacrosse in Maryland. So I played football and I played lacrosse. And it was very interesting dichotomies between those two seasons. Football season, I'm hanging out with my homeboys, right? And then lacrosse season, I'm hanging out with my other homeboys, right? And I'm this weird like blend of the two because I lived in this like upper middle class neighborhood. I mean, like I was one of 3 non-black families that was in there. There was the principal of my school was a black woman, lived there, and this other homeboy of mine, his dad was Puerto Rican, his wife, my homeboy's mom was black. They lived there too. But so I'm thinking about a bunch of different things. I went to school with one of the Keenans, like Keenan Flagler Keenan, like Keenan Stadium Keenan, like, and I thought we had okay money. You go to a person's house like that, they have a 7-car garage, and you're like, I am poor. And but now I'm getting into a bunch of different things. What was wild in the high school was like my family and like a few other black families were like the rich black families. It's just like upper middle class, man, at that point in time. I lived in an apartment at one point too. I see my parents come up, but then you meet white people who got like generational wealth, like to the point where, they could spend $1 million in a month and be good. Like it's a different perspective. Anyway, okay, so I got this job at the hospital with my homeboys, my football team. We wild, man. We just over there wilding, okay? And I took that job because I didn't have to cut my hair because my dad's old school. He was like, you can't have your hair like that. Like I had my hair like this one other time in my life for a few months in high school. So I had this job. And then this white woman who was like our supervisor took me aside and she was like, well, I'm not, you want a raise, but I'm not going to give you this raise. And I think that you just get over on people because you're a good looking black boy. Right. Wow. I wowed out, man. Of course, my homeboys, they always thought it was funny when I wowed out. They're like, look, he's supposed to be the good one.
Yeah. Right? I get that same sentiment, right? I get that same sentiment.
Right. If you ever read Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, and he really talks about, in South Africa, he's not black, he's colored, right? His dad's a white Swiss dude. His mom was a black African. But like, he didn't want to hang out with the white people in the color. He wanted to hang out with the darker skinned black people with the lower, socioeconomic status. Because it was just, you could just be yourself, man. You could just be yourself. That's how I felt too, man. My best experiences was always with my homeboys who grew up a lot worse than me. They checked me all the time, right? And it was cool, man. I still love them for that. So I stuff would happen. I wowed out. I got fired, man. I got fired. Well, honestly, it was a combination of me getting fired and me walking out too,
Yeah.
right? But this was a theme for me in jobs in high school, right? I worked at Harris Teeter for 3 days when I was in high school, right? So like, it's like what you gotta do the carts, right?
Right.
First of all, I was already mad because I wasn't able to be a cashier, and I had already been a cashier at Jersey Mike's. And I was like, you just don't want me to be a cashier because I'm Black, man. And so I already had that edge to me, right?
Right.
And the neurodivergent stuff is going on. There's this thing called rejection sensitivity. So when you experience like rejection or things that are negative, you just get really upset about it. But there's also something called racial rejection sensitivity. So in my opinion, this is what part of my research is looking at. If you're Black and neurodivergent, you're experiencing both of these things. So they get heightened. And that kind of explains a large part of my life. So
wow. Okay.
They told me to go do the carts. I did the carts. And it was rare to have to do the carts twice in one shift.
Yeah.
They had my name down 3 times. And I looked at it, I was like, why is my name down here 3 times? Well, Johnny over here, he's got Down syndrome. So you don't want to help Johnny out? Hey man, don't try to play me like that. My name is on there 3 times. Wow. Some people's name is on there once. Why can't you put them? Don't try to act like I don't want to help Johnny out. Don't play with me like, well, oh, Wesley, you're getting kind of loud. You know what? F this job.
Yeah. Now you said almost self-fulfilling prophecy. You said it, right. Do it. Wow.
Right. This happened to me quite a bit.
You know what's funny to me? Man. Like the stories are like me and your stories. We never met before, but some of our stories are so similar, right? Because worked in a hospital, have these different things. I'd say the one situation I really ran into racism for the first time was like probably when I was, of course, driving my Honda Accord and got pulled over, racial profiling, for having a nice car. I had I tell the story every time. I had my Honda Accord, had rims on it, had lights on it, system.
Of course you did. Yeah.
Yeah. But it got searched before. I got searched by narcotics thinking that I had something in there. Searched it illegally. They couldn't search it, but they, as a teenager driving, you got to search it. I got braids, light skin, whatever. I looked the part, but I told them all you can find is some wires in there. But so that started a string of events, right? To the point where it's now like I still have the heightened sensitivity around it. And I have a situation where like I was driving a Honda Civic from grad school and had 6 narcotics around me. But it's another story. The first one was when I was working at Kings Dominion. I had braids, and they told me, and it was probably at my shoulder at this point, and they was like, well, you need to cut your hair. Your hair is too long.
At an amusement park.
At an amusement
park. We supposed to be having fun over here?
At an amusement park. So I'm making $7.50 an hour, maybe, working with me and my cousin. And they're like, you got to cut your hair. And I was like, well, what if I don't want to cut it? They was like, oh, well, we're going to have to, let you go. And it was so stark because I had been there for about a couple months or almost a year. And to say, okay, well, we can't keep you here because of your hair. And I saw somebody else whose hair was longer than mine. They didn't say anything to him. And it was a Black girl and it was a white girl. And they came to me. And I said, yo, why? If I cut my hair, it's going to come back even quicker. Like, you know what I'm saying? Told the Black girl, that you Black, right? You know what I'm saying? And she just, acquiesced to what the white girl was saying. And she was in on it. And I was just like, yo, what? Now I'm done with that. And so I got fired. But like you said, I got fired, but I walked off. They made me leave the park. And I had to sit in my cousin's car for his entire shift because it was at the beginning of my shift and wait for him. They made me leave the park. So I had to sit in my car for the whole time. Man, I'm talking about it almost went to fight. This is my point in time. My grandma was about to get active because she was in NAACP. My mom was pissed, everybody. And it was my first time really experiencing that from a microaggression, standpoint. Like my hair is too long to work a $7.50 an hour job. I know that's crazy to hear that, but that's what it was back then. You know what I'm saying? And so I that kind of shaped my outlook and my hair outlook, going forward, and then being who I am as a person, and then those times where I am quiet, I'm calm, I'm shy, I'm reserved. But if you try me, it's this other side, you know what I'm saying? Because of that, you know what I'm saying? So Yeah, that's
You
it's
go through
interesting.
these things. You go through these things over year after year, month after month,
Mm-hmm.
year after year after year. And eventually, man, you snap, man. Like
Yeah.
I just like it, and it doesn't just happen when we're youth, man. It's happened in my that's one of the number one reasons why I left corporate, man. I can't tell you how many times I was about to throw hands. Like I was just so
Same.
angry, man. I was like,
Yeah.
why are you treating me like this? And y'all ain't smart enough to even be treating me like this in the first place, man.
Right.
And so,
Right.
and then you get in these other experiences and you have it, you're like, you know what, man? Nah, I'm good,
Mm-hmm.
man. I'm good. I'm good. Like it's just like insult after insult after insult, man. And so like you look at, there was a study, I think like 2017, 2015, something like that. Forgot his name, man. Prolific Black researcher. He's around now. He does a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like looking at like, you know, the wage gap for Black folks
Right.
specifically. And it was, I might be getting some of the details mixed up, but it was looking at uh like our like Black folks with advanced degrees. So you and me, Black
Mm-hmm.
folks with advanced, not just bachelor's degree, masters and up,
Right.
had the same. I don't remember if it was like earning or wealth. I don't remember. I might be getting it confused. I feel like it was earning, but it was
Uh-huh.
had this. We're earning the same amount as white people with a GED. Like that. Like actually, white
Wow.
people with a GED were earning like on average like $2,000 more a year than Black people with an advanced degree. When we got 40 years old in the data set, it showed that we caught up to our peers with the same level of education. And so my whole thing is like, I turned 40 this past December. So where's my money? Where is my money? I've had
Yeah.
jobs. I've never been promoted in my life. I have never had a bad performance. Well, that's not true. In my corporate career, there were 3 jobs where I had some bad performance reviews, but they were
Yeah.
racist type stuff, man, in
Right.
my opinion. And so, but like, look at the 2 jobs where I had the most success. I never had a bad performance review. They were flawless.
Mm.
Can I get it? Can I get a new title?
Mm-hmm.
No. Well, why?
Mm.
No reasons. Can I get a salary increase? Well, okay, I know that state legislature tripping and all that. Okay, I get it. Let me get a title change, man. 5 years, did all this stuff, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
just like, no, well, why, Wes? Why do you want a title anyway? What does a title really mean? You gonna say that to me when you have the title I would
Have
want?
the title.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So when I go out into the job market and I'm applying for jobs, one, my background, I have all these different experiences, right? So it's hard for people who aren't ADHD or like us to really look at that and be analytical and figure that out. Like, well,
Right.
what does he really want to do? I'm good at a lot of different things, so I try to do a lot of different things. It doesn't mean that I'm inconsistent. I'm
Same.
good at a lot of different things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they'll see like, man, well, okay, he was at this one job for 5 years and did all this stuff, but he never got promoted. Like, well, okay, well, what's wrong with him? Because when
That's
we're
the
Black,
first thought.
it's an old Chris Rock joke. When you white, the sky's the limit. When you Black, the limit's the sky,
The limit
right? And
sky.
so
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
gonna look at it as like, well, clearly, I mean, there's something wrong with them, right? And man, that made me so angry, man. I was like, you know what? I don't want these jobs. I can do my own thing. Why do I even want this? Why do I even want this? You know what? Nah. And
Mm.
you know, and a double down on it, I'm backing out even farther, man. Like I'm
Yeah.
just gonna be my radical self. But it pushes you. It pushes you. Like I
Oh.
became this person, and I'm glad I became this person because I can see things I didn't see. But
Mm-hmm.
if everything went the way that I wanted it to, like, you know, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would have just been complacent. Who
You'd have
knows?
been
I might have been
complacent.
like Tim Scott out here. Who knows, man?
Yeah.
You know? Glad I'm not.
You know, dang, that really confirmed something for me today because I was thinking about you said you never got any promotion. I never got a promotion at any of my jobs.
Never.
Maybe a training on something, but we might can put you up to this. And there was the conversation around. I haven't really stayed at no job longer than the hospital job. I stayed there for about on and off, maybe 5, 6, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's never no talk about something else, right? And it kind of was like, okay, well, it's coming to an end. You got your bachelor's degree. You're going to move on anyway. Um, there was talks. I'm looking at the undergrad job, inpatient. There was a conversation, but then about leading, maybe like being a lead, but never materialized. I ended up going to grad school. They was bringing in people with no degrees, paying them
Mm-hmm.
more. That was a big issue. And then I get to the postgraduate, and did there for that was probably 3.5 years. no really promotion. I did apply for other positions that within that was, um, in the department, didn't get it over somebody else, and they kept rising up. Ended up being my supervisor, actually. No ill will to her, but just like seeing those dynamics, I did apply for another position that I could have gotten if I wanted it, but I didn't want it. I just, wanted to laterally move.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last job, there was no conversation about where's the next thing, upper mobility. It was like more responsibility, more liability. And that was the driving force to go into private practice
Yeah.
and just say, I'm going to just do my own thing and figure it out. But because of these situations, right? Because of these places where I've never known what a promotion looks like or felt like,
Mm-hmm.
this drive me to be, this entrepreneur that I always wanted to be. But at the same time, what if I did have those promotions, and would I even have this drive to do the work that I do today? That's stuck.
It's a weird double-edged sword, man. I
Yeah.
mean, it's back to the complexities that Black people deal with since birth. We like, I'm sure like me, you was in elementary school, it's Black History Month. They're gonna wheel out the TV and show some really depressing video and talk about MLK, and you just sitting there like, okay, if I could go back in time, I would end slavery, but that also I would eradicate it from even happening. But that also means I wouldn't exist. But I would take that because it's hard. But there's so much crap. Right? I'm not gonna say my existence is hard, but I love life. But
right.
But like that, that just weighs on you, right? And so you think about being neurodivergent. In addition to that, you got this rejection sensitivity, and we Black men, so there's racial rejection sensitivity, and there was a few different jobs where I've experienced this at, but like, one of my more recent ones, and I'm kind of be a little bit more vague intentionally here, but like one of my more recent ones I had in the past, I really made a very intentional effort to do everything right, right? Did all the things I was supposed to do, developed all these programs, went above and beyond, brought national recognition to the office. What else do I have to do? I did everything. What else do I? And man, it just broke me, man. It broke me. But it broke. Sometimes we need to be broken. Like if you're a subscriber to the Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, which is like the model for like every story. Basically, it's you start here and then something happens and you cross into this world of the unknown and you fight a great battle. You probably lose and you find a mentor and you learn all these things and you become stronger and then you re-enter that world you were once in. This new person. I just re-entered this world, this new world as this new person with these strengths that I had but didn't realize. And like, so that's my hero's journey. But if I didn't have that pain, I wouldn't have been in this situation. Right. But I don't even like saying that because I feel like it lets people off the damn hook.
Exactly. Like it's like it validates like, okay, why do I have to go through this pain in order to get to this other side, knowing that my white counterparts, it's just like they walk into it with just ease. It's just like 1, 2, James Harden step, boom, here I am. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, that's the answer. But you know what? But I think like that you're defining that and kind of speaking on that kind of helped me right now with where I'm at, my business structure and what's next, and kind of figuring it out. And like I'm just going to go back to work or do something else. And it's just like, well, you. Right. And there's also a reason why maybe some of these jobs and positions don't look appealing. Right. Because what's in store and your trajectory. Right. And your worth because you've done some self-employment. You've done some work in the last, couple of years that you can speak to say, well, I know I can do this. But it's like, well, all those options, what's the best option?
Right. I want to say this for you and for anyone else who listens to this. So as Black folks, whether we grow up in a Black community or not, we have family that's in a Black community, and we'll see a lot of folks in that community who find ways to, earn a living, whether it's, illegal or legal, right? They find ways to earn a living to support themselves where they can maintain some pride, where they can maintain some autonomy, right? And we know this, but we don't really think it. We're like, okay, that's just like, some people trying to survive. Let me go out here and get a good job, blah, 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 blah. But what I want people to know is, man, you go out here and you get some education, you get some experience, some I don't want to like put credentials on a platform because some of the smartest brothers I know don't have a formal education and are locked up. Okay. But you get out here and you get something behind your name. There's a whole community of Black folks who are educated and got some money and got some sense who aren't doing the 9-to-5 job. And that's no slight. My wife works a 9-to-5 job. Okay. I'm not slighting that. I don't want people to think that either. Because even when you're working for yourself, you're still working for someone. You're working for your clients. You're working for, your other clients that whatever. You're always working for someone. Okay. So I know people get hyper LLC, Twitter, and all this. You gotta work for yourself. You're always working for someone. Okay. It's just about how much autonomy and control that you have. Right. But when we're this is me trying to recapture these thoughts. I was on it, and then it was
talking about like just like business and kind of navigating that space, entrepreneurship. If you want to decrease,
there is a whole community, a whole industry, if you want to call it that, of Black educated folks who are in philanthropy, who are in consulting, who are in nonprofits, who are in business, who focus on Black people. They have taken the white gaze out of their work. It doesn't mean that they don't love and have white people to even work for them or with them, right? But we are working for the issues that we do, right? When I was at when I was talking about the Students Moving Forward program, some other stuff I developed, it was at a PWI, right? Where I actually went to undergrad, right? And where I'm getting my PhD from. And so when I did that, the overwhelming majority of the students in that program are white. So here I put my all into that. I helped these mostly white boys, these white male students who are autistic, get some better community, get some better job opportunities, and proceed. I had one student who consistently came out. I had a few others, but one who consistently came out who was Black. He just graduated with a PhD in nuclear engineering. Second Black person ever from the university to graduate with a PhD in nuclear engineering. And it was hard for him, just as you would imagine. He's neurodivergent, he's Black, right? But I did all of that for really like let's keep it a buck for white kids. I did all that for white kids. And I'm like, hey, I'm all about helping everybody. Okay. Right. But the second I want to start talking about Black issues within neurodivergence, why are you being divisive? You know what?
Why's it gotta be about race?
You know what? I'm gonna be more divisive. Bye. Right. Yeah. That's how I feel, man. I'm like, y'all, they push and push and push and push you away to where you have to make your own decisions about things, man. And I sound really angry right now because I am. That's the Black experience. So what? Okay, I'm a therapist. I've worked through that anger. The anger doesn't. The anger is not the center of my life. It doesn't. I'm not making decisions out of anger, but I have very valid reasons to be angry about it. It'd be weird if I wasn't angry about it, man.
Exactly. It doesn't materialize enough. It just is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's not.
Even Black Buddhists embrace Black rage. There's a really dope book called Black and Buddhist, and it's the Black rage is very accepted even within Zen Buddhist culture. Okay. So like we need to embrace our Black rage. We can't stop running from this. This is real. It's valid. It's just. It doesn't mean that we got to be out here wilding, but look, man, I'm not gonna cower back because someone else is uncomfortable. I'm not gonna change my patterns of how I manage myself because it's not what someone else likes, right?
It's not socially acceptable. Yeah.
I love Ryan Coogler, man. He does not code switch at all. And I love it. I want to see more of that, man. I want to see more of it because it's just a different dialect. People want to act like, Black people talking like this. Every language has multiple dialects.
Yeah.
You go in different parts of the country in the US and people sound different when they talk English. You go to the UK and people sound different when they talk English. Those are different dialects of English. Gullah Geechee is a dialect of English, but we treat it as though, it's just this bastardization of the English language to these Black people. But it's a different dialect, man. Just That's respect us. Just it's that simple. Exactly. It's that simple. Just can we put a little respect on it, man?
That what's crazy about that is that from the code switching standpoint, even like just being in the classroom setting, in the client setting with my my clients, and just being able to speak that way and still get across clinical nomenclature, get across the educational pieces of that book that we're teaching in class and doing both of it. And I think that's just super liberating, you know what I'm saying, for that, you know, as well. Because so much, man, we've been taught to talk this way and do that. I know sometimes my friends joke that I use big words, but I'm like, you know, I can say that and then I'll come back and, you know, say, yo, what's good? Like, you know what I'm saying? Just doing that too. So it's just, and I did that on a national stage, not national stage, but like at Mental Health America's conference last year.
Mm-hmm.
Presenting like being the black man being to heal and be the healer. And one of the black guys in the audience, he was like, man, look, he was like, I don't know how much you know, but like the fact that you were able to sit up here in this presentation with all these people in here, the diverse people in here, and not code switch and still tell this story around that is huge for me. And I was just like, "Would you hear anything rest of the whole conversation of the presentation?" But you know, for me, and I sat back and thought about it, I was like, you know what? That's probably the first time you ever seen somebody with professional credentials in this setting with these diverse communities and not having to code switch and still sounds like him if it was one of his homeboys in the chat. And that's liberating. You know what I'm saying? I was like, that's that piece right there is going to help his mental space. You know what I'm saying? Not mostly what we're talking about in the actual presentation. So I definitely, you know, agree to that.
I want to say something about that point you made on the neurodivergent point too, because I've gotten this at different points in my life, right? Third generation college student, grandmother was an English teacher, dad has written a best-selling book, all this sorts of stuff. My mom is a teacher who was also a college student as well, college graduate as well. So it's like, well, why are you talking like that in certain ways, man? You just trying to be performing, you just trying to like blend in, blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. That's not how you were raised. Well, you know what? So if you look at any of these little YouTube videos I've been doing, which kind of, I don't edit them or anything. It's a part of me getting over my perfectionism, which is another issue of neurodivergence. And also the combination of neurodivergence plus white gaze, it makes that perfectionism so damn strong, man. And so I got to remember what I was saying. So started thinking about
perfectionism, and then just like I was talking about the code switching and not code switching.
Okay. You at that thing, right? So if you look at, like, there was some LinkedIn posts I made where I also put one of the videos, right? One of the little walking videos I had. And if you read what I've written, it reads very different from how I speak. That's an ADHD thing, right? I can articulate myself to a masterful degree in my writings, why I've been able to excel in grad school. I barely graduated from undergrad. It wasn't a sign of intelligence. It was because I was an assistant. It wasn't designed for me. I had a 2.26 in undergrad, right? And I'm getting a PhD from the same undergrad the same institution I barely graduated in. So I want people, especially black people, especially black boys, because we have some other issues when it comes to school. Just because you had bad grades doesn't mean you can't do more. Okay.
Yeah.
I had bad grades and I was able to come back and do it. Like, it's okay, man. Your experience and your intelligence means something. So one of these ADHD things is like being able to recall certain words and pull them out. Your brain moves way faster than anything else when you're ADHD. There's this white dude, really good ADHD advocate. I forget his name. I think it's like Howell or something like that. And he came up with this little phrase. It was Ferrari brain, bicycle brakes. My ADHD brain is like a Ferrari. And I think even for a neurotypical black person, that experience makes your brain just go a little bit faster because you have to be hyper vigilant about things, which, if we're also being real, hypervigilance is anxiety. Okay. Right. It's necessary for survival, but it's anxiety. And I realized I had a lot more of that than I thought. So when I talk, hip hop and that language was so much easier for me because it's hard for me to get my words out clearly. A lot of folks who are ADHD slur words sometimes because our brain is moving so much faster than our mouth. I can speak much more naturally in that type of dialect than I can trying to speak in some other way that's just not natural for me. But people would try to act like that I wasn't being authentic. Are you raised in the upper middle class home? Blah, blah. Why do you talk like that? Well, it's ADHD, man. That's because it's easier for me. It's more direct, and I can get to the point a lot quicker and faster. And so it's important for people to see all those sides because Black folks have been everything in this country. The most intellectual, scientific people who have invented things, who have developed new theories, who have helped people in a multitude of ways, and the most creative and expressive people at the same time, right? And so from great struggle, from great pain comes a lot of greatness. But you know what? Sometimes I just want to be mediocre, man. So why don't y'all just give me my reparations so I can just chill?
Let's give my reparations. Get my money real quick so I can go ahead and chill. But you know what? And I'm gonna get ready to close out because we are coming up on 2 hours now. I knew.
We've been talking for a minute.
That's why I asked at the initial. I said, "How much time you got?" Because I know where it can go. All that I'm listening to you, I'm hearing all of this, and I'm saying that all you're saying and what you're talking about. And to me, it just really, really resonated with me to understand that don't put us in a box, right? Don't put us in a box of professionalism, creativity, a certain way to read, certain way to act, certain way to behave. Don't put us in a box because you don't know what or how we're processing it unless you actually sit and listen and ask. You don't know what that experience may have happened to us and how that makes us feel because every experience looks different for everybody else. And these things look different per each Black person. You know what I'm saying? Black boys, Black men, Black girls, non-binary, LGBTQIA, it looks different. And so if you're not taking the time to understand that and just try to box people in, then yes, it's not going to work. That's that as you've kind of curtailed that and brought it out, I just thought about that because that's just what it sounds like. And to me, it resonates with me because I've always lived by that. Don't box me in. Don't box me in. Don't try to make me somebody that I'm not. This is who I am. And I was going to say too earlier, back on the Black anger side, once I learn to just embrace the anger and not see it as this negative connotation where it's like, I have to not be angry. I have to not be angry. I have to not be angry. And address where it came from, but also be comfortable in my anger. A lot of weight lifted off my shoulder. Yes, I will go that far. And I'm a Christian and I, everything, whatever. And I believe what I believe. I'm in leadership in my church, everything. But that I'm not afraid of anger. I know what it is. I know what it feels like. And if something rubs me the wrong way or it disrespects me or disrespect my Blackness, my family, X, Y, and Z, or if it's a social justice issue that I'm going to stand up for it. And this is what you're going to get. You're not going to get a passive, calm Trey in these situations. And so once I learned that and I had to go through some negative experiences to deal with that, man, a lot of liberation was from that. But Wes, man, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you so much, man.
I love this. I love the work that you do, man. I love seeing us out here. I really like talking to you, brother. This was great. I hope we get to do this some more. Yeah. I get my podcast up and running. You definitely going to be on there a few times, man. I enjoy connecting with you and talking. And by the way, the anger piece, Jesus, a brown, Black man, whoever you want to say, definitely won't white. The brother got so mad he flipped tables and was whipping people. So righteous anger is validated. I am also blessed and highly favored. I understand.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
I'm not like evangelical at this point anymore in my life, and I never really was. But still, man, that's my faith. That's the faith I grew up in. I respect that, and it's helped me in so many ways. And you know what, man? If you only talking about peace all the time, you don't recognize that the Prince of Peace also, he had a mean right hook.
Right. Exactly. So I just think it's so much to it. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking to this. You confirmed some things for me. You affirmed some things for me that I didn't even know was going to happen today. But yeah, man, appreciate all the work that you're doing, everything you got out there, your YouTube channel, all that you got going on from your consulting business, your private practice as well. Let people know where they can find you at, social media links, and then also your YouTube page, things like that. Let people know where they can find you.
Right. Oh, appreciate that, man. You can find me on Twitter at Wes_Wade. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn at Wesley Wade. You'll see my mug up there. And you can also check out my personal branding website. It's wesleyjacksonwade.com. And I throw a lot of stuff up there. The YouTube channel that I just started like 2 weeks ago, been throwing some videos out. Peace, Love, Power, which was the name of a podcast I started right before the pandemic. And then pandemic, baby, all this stuff put a axe to that, but it's coming back. But you can go to YouTube. Peace, Love, Power is the name of the page, and you can see my posts under there.
That's what's up, man. Yeah, man. Well, Wes, I appreciate that, man. Definitely appreciate you coming on. Make sure you like, share, subscribe to the podcast. Let me know what you think about the episode. We're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, all your digital streaming platforms. Check it out. Let us know what you think. Leave a review. And if I'm not on your DSP on that side, please let me know. I'm gonna try to get on there as well, man. But this is the end of the G.Taylor Show. Shout out to our guest Wes Wade, man, for coming on, having this very in-depth conversation. I hope that you learn something from it, gain something from it. And if you need us to come out to consult, tap in with us. Y'all
Pay
take
black
care.
man.
Pay black man. Take care. Y'all have a great week. All right.